Welcome to RCR Insights. I'm Martha DeGrasse, and our topic today is media processing in the cloud. And I'm joined today by Ian Maclean. He is VP of Strategy and Marketing at Mavenir Systems. Ian, thanks for being here today.
Thank you very much, Martha.
Do you want to take just a minute to tell us a little bit about Mavenir Systems?
Yeah, great, thank you. Mavenir Systems was founded with a vision to help mobile operators transform their networks to 4G LTE. We provide a full suite of products and solutions that enable operators to launch Voiceover LTE and rich communications as value-added services, communication services that they'll enable over their brand new 4G LTE radio networks.
Okay, thank you. I'm also joined by Philip Kendall. He is Service Director at Strategy Analytics, following this area. Philip, take just a minute, if you could, to tell us a little bit about your area of focus at Strategy Analytics.
Sure, thanks, Martha. So, Strategy Analytics is an international market research and consulting firm. I'm part of our wireless operator and networks team. So we look at the broad value chain of the wireless market, looking at the technologies that vendors are bringing to market, looking and talking extensively with operators about how rapidly they're planning to deploy new technologies and what they're looking to get out of those technologies. And equally spending time talking to end users about what type of services they want to use, and hopefully those three elements all line up, and we see these real opportunities of sort of new technologies tapping into latent demand in the consumer base.
I think they will. Okay, thank you. And Ray Adensamer is Director of Marketing at Radisys. Ray, thanks for joining us today. Take a minute to tell us a little bit about Radisys.
Great, thank you, Martha. So Radisys has a range of products for enabling wireless infrastructure solutions. One of our product lines is the Trillium Software Group, and they're doing a lot of investments in small cell software stacks that we would sell to small cell gateways. So a lot of the early LTE deployments using small cells in Korea, a lot of that is enabled by Radisys technology. Second area would be the Radisys T-Series platforms. So this is a family of platforms used for SDN and NFV, specifically focused on data plane applications, the high throughput data plane applications. And the third area, the area that I'm more focused on, is the media processing area of the business. And we're leaders in a product area called MRF, Media Resource Function, and we offer that product in various form factors, both software that can be installed on a server, software that can be virtualized in the telecom cloud, as well as DSP hardware media servers. So we work very closely with Maveneer on a number of voice-over LTE trials and deployments around the world today.
Okay, great. I hope we'll get to hear a little bit about that as well. So we all know that network operators are evaluating NFV and looking at which functions can and should be virtualized. And Maveneer, I think, has a suite of solutions for operators. So, Ian, maybe you can start us off by putting media processing in context a little bit with other cloud-based applications.
Sure, Martha. I'll sort of give a big picture answer to the question. What mobile operators are doing are building their next generation networks. They're taking advantage of technologies that are available and proven in the IT space in order to build these brand new networks. 4G LTE is basically a discontinuity from the previous generations of technologies. We're implementing all IP products and solutions and technology rather than circuit switched. So these are brand new networks, and operators will leverage what's available in the IT space, proven in all IP networks in the IT space, and extract meaningful benefits from this new strategy. The benefits that operators will have with virtualization is the ability to manage and operate their next generation networks better and more cost effectively, more efficiently than they have in the past. They'll be able to lower their total cost of ownership for the next generation network by deploying their products and solutions, software-based products and solutions, on industry standard virtualized computing platforms. They'll be able to have, with software-based products and solutions, they'll be able to have greater deployment flexibility for their products and solutions, and they'll be able to have greater service agility. These are very, very important attributes for the operator because, number one, they're competing with OTT service providers who in many cases offer their communication services for free. So obviously they need lower cost points for their infrastructure. This is what virtualization will provide. They also need to, a term that I usually use, is they need to raise the bar in terms of the user experience. They need to offer new, compelling services in order to improve the user experience. It's no longer sufficient for operators simply to provide voice and text messaging services. They're looking to provide comparable services, communication services to their consumers, such as voice, real-time interactive messaging, presence, location sharing, services like that. That will provide a better user experience. And this is where media processing is an integral part of the functions that need to be enabled in the operator's cloud-based infrastructure. And that's in order to be able to deploy video services in various ways to provide a better user experience, as I mentioned. Video will be a fundamental and integral component of the operator's service offer when they launch Volte. Subscribers will not only get a better voice user experience with HD audio voice quality, as well as faster call setup times, they'll also be able to use FaceTime-like services that will be enabled via the subscribers or the phone's contact list and address book. So media processing is a fundamental component that enables that functionality and that service. And we've partnered with Radisys in order to, and we're using their products as a part of our software-based platform and software-based solutions to enable that very important service for operators.
Okay, thank you. So media processing has in the past often been done on, I think, dedicated hardware. And Ray, maybe you can sort of give us a little bit of insight into your specific solution and some of the pros and cons here.
Great, thanks. That's a great question. So let's start where we are today. So the majority of our installed base still uses hardware-based media servers. You know, if we think about the trends in virtualization, I think everyone in the industry would agree it's going to be the control and signaling plane first, and the media plane and data plane will come sort of as a follow-on. And the reason for that is simple. The data plane, including media processing, is very time sensitive. It's very sensitive to latency, to jitter in the network and things like that. That's why historically products like routers, switches, and even media processing needed to be hardware based. And so the trend in the future is everyone wants to virtualize their networks, and that's what, for example, SDN is all about, right? Is to separate out the the switching and forwarding plane from the orchestration layer. And then that's what the T-Series platforms are all about that Radisys is involved with. But getting back to media processing, so we've recognized these trends in virtualization as well. You know, we did, a few years ago now already do a software MRF that we could install on a commercial off-the-shelf server. And more recently, getting into virtualization. But remember, the requirements are, low latency, minimum jitter. So when you install a software MRF on a hypervisor layer in a virtualized environment, that hypervisor layer can do weird and funny things to the packet flows. And that's a lot of the engineering and the tuning that Radisys has to do to certify our product to work on KVM or VMware or some of those other types of products. So in fact, it was working with Maveneer, one of our customers, together that really pushed us to say, okay, let's get this working on VMware. We just recently announced that, and we were quite surprised with some of our experiences. First off, we thought, by putting it on a hypervisor, you would lose a lot of capacity, right? And in fact, the capacity hit wasn't as bad as we had thought. It's like less than 10%. The other thing that we found is that with proper tuning of both the hypervisor layer and the the software MRF itself, we were able to get that reliable media processing both for audio and video packets with very high quality.
Okay, great. Now, Philip, can you share a little bit about what you're hearing as in your conversations with operators and vendors about virtualizing some of this? I know it's a big step for operators, and they need to really know what's going to pay off in the end, both from the network cost perspective and from a user perspective.
Yeah, sure. I mean, certainly virtualization is a long journey that operators are going on, and it's hard to find an operator who isn't sort of committed to moving down that path. In terms of the types of functions and elements that they're looking to virtualize, I mean, there's certainly some quick wins in the back office, more sort of the database sort of warehousing side of the network. But virtualizing some of the newer functionalities is also a key one for them. I guess if you're sitting down now thinking about voice or video over LTE and looking to put, say, an IMS in place to support that, then it makes sense to build that solution on a long-term sort of future-proof platform, and so many are evaluating the ability to virtualize those types of sort of new elements rather than start putting new hardware in that may become redundant sooner rather than later.
Now, Ian brought up the point, Phil, about Volte enabling video chat type functionality for consumers. Are operators focusing on that? Is that something that they hope to offer as they roll out Volte?
It's absolutely part of the mix. I mean, to a certain extent, Volte so far has focused on the HD voice side of the equation. So it's a better experience of the same old voice service that you currently have. But certainly in the medium term, operators are looking to wrap a lot more functionality around that experience. So your communication sort of hub or suite on your phone. So you can mix the text, voice, video, pictures, and have this better feature-rich experience. I think, I mean, it very much goes back to Ian's point earlier that the operators need some service agility because they are being out-innovated by the over-the-top providers in the market. So adding video conferencing, adding a lot of functionalities is certainly part of their medium-term strategies there.
And what about, I'm sorry, go ahead.
If I could interject as well. It's interesting, I was just reading an article yesterday about Verizon's plans for their Voice over LTE launch. So this is just with an online publication, and but it did quote the operator. So they did reconfirm their commitment to launching Voice over LTE during 2014. You may have heard the press recently with AT&T having revealed plans to launch Voice over LTE in select markets on May 23rd. So it's certainly an exciting time within the industry. We're at an inflection point where leading operators in the US are launching Voice over LTE. Specifically, Verizon, the quote that I recall from the article about Verizon's launch was that they did talk about their plans and intent to enable the video calling service with their Voice over LTE launch. And I find it interesting in terms of how they describe it. It was described as being a FaceTime-like service that's enabled with the contacts in your address book on the phone. So it's important, and the differentiation I think they're taking to the market is that you'll have the same user experience as you have with the OTT provider, in this case Apple and FaceTime, but it will work natively on the device. It'll work with contacts in your address book. And so they're already positioning themselves relative to OTT to provide a differentiated experience which is embedded and native to the device. And I think that's also very important. We'll see them beginning to, as I said earlier, raise the bar in terms of the services they offer and the user experience that they're providing their consumers and their subscribers. And it will all be native. And I think that's a very, very important part as to the operator strategy. And as Phil just mentioned, they're going to offer more additional services as well. In this case, Verizon specifically named video, but we anticipate there will be follow-on services as well.
Now, Ray, do you think that operators will be willing to take on a lot of this in the cloud from the beginning, or do you think that as these new services roll out, they will first be more hardware-based?
No, I think any of the new builds going on for mobile operators moving to 4G architectures or new greenfield deployments, all of them are thinking of software or virtualized software in the network, and that's where most of our new deals are going to. And I just wanted to touch on, some of the things we do in media processing. So, when you do a basic voice over LTE call, it's, the call setup, it's playing the announcements, the network tones, collecting the digits. But there's going to be a transition period from 3G to 4G. So somewhere in the network, you need to do the transcoding of an AMR wideband voice over LTE call to a 3G call or a PSTN G711 call. Those are some of the functions that we do a lot. Another one is the conference mixing. We talked a lot about the conferencing, and one we haven't touched on yet is Webrtc.
Yeah.
and being able to integrate Webrtc clients with SIP and Volte clients, and being able to do the video transcoding and translating between those clients. Those are the types of applications that media processing is being used for, both virtualized media processing as well as some of our dedicated products.
And then, are the dedicated products dedicated hardware, or just a blade that would be part of off-the-shelf hardware?
In our case, it's a dedicated system, so it would be a chassis-based system, and you could configure blades, both CPU or DSP blades, into that chassis.
Okay, great. And Phil, I'd like to get your perspective on the Webrtc that Ray brought up. I know that might be one of the areas that operators are looking at as a new service innovation. Would you agree, or do you think it's not at the top of the list? What are you hearing?
We're hearing certainly some enterprise units within operators are sort of seriously considering the role for Webrtc. I think for many operators, they're not quite at that stage yet. I mean, to a certain extent, this voice and text and video space is one, but for the average operator, it does risk sort of passing them by. They're not in a particularly sort of aggressive, sort of innovative play at the moment, and I think Webrtc, for many of them, they still see as almost as a threat rather than an opportunity they can embrace. But certainly, I think the operators need to sort of broaden their focus and really sort of attack some of these technologies. They certainly bring some benefits to what they're trying to achieve in keeping customers on their network and keeping customers happy.
Well, that's interesting. Ray, would you agree that some operators see Webrtc as more of a threat than an opportunity?
I think I would agree with that. Also, I think it's still very early stages for Webrtc. I agree with Phil's comment. There's a lot. Most of it is happening in the enterprise. Contact centers, specific verticals like healthcare. But for carrier services, multi-network, multi-operator, it's still a ways out. There's not much money being made there, quite frankly, amongst the the infrastructure and vendor community. And but it gets back to some of the comments that Ian was making, which is operators rolling out Volte and right away trying to differentiate that offering with the FaceTimes and over the top types of offerings by putting it natively into the mobile handsets. And so to Phil's comment, they need to focus on that. They need to get their voice revenues, their core revenues into a firm landscape again, and then on top of that they can build these new next generation services.
Right. Now, with Verizon and AT&T finally rolling out Volte, do you think, Phil, that we'll see smaller operators feeling more pressured? I think that until now, a lot of operators have felt that LTE for data and 3G for voice was working just fine. Do you think that Volte efforts will accelerate in the second half of this year, or not really?
I mean, certainly we're seeing sort of broad global momentum, and we've talked about the US carriers. I just think in the last 2 weeks there's been players in France and Hong Kong and sort of Singapore sort of getting up to speed with their Volte services. So I think purely in the US market, yeah, the smaller players are going to have to look at those technologies. I know sort of Sprint has quite extensive plans around HD voice, but if it wants to compete with that richer user experience that the Volte platform offers, then certainly it and T-Mobile and the other carriers need to sort of up their game and respond. So certainly second half of this year, moving into next year, I think it is going to become more of a norm than the exception.
Okay, great. And Ian, what opportunities is Maveneer seeing with the move to Volte? Can you hear me, Ian?
I'm sorry, Martha, I missed part of the question.
Oh, that's okay.
It broke up a little bit.
I know that
Can you hear me?
You have worked in virtualizing a lot of different functions for operators, and so I was wanting to see if you could share a little bit about specific opportunities that you see as more operators may be moving to Volte.
Well, there's a lot of benefits of virtualization for operators when they're building out these next generation networks. I think deployment flexibility is one of them. I'll give a couple examples as to how operators can embrace this technology now, maybe even before NFV is necessarily available. They can use virtualization to deploy multi-tenancy, for example, to multi-tenant solutions. They can instantiate, individual, discrete, dedicated product instances to different operating properties, and we're working with a customer in Europe today who have a pan-European rollout strategy, and they're using virtualization to enable that. They're hosting a pan-European service rollout by dedicating product instances to each of their properties and launching a pan-European service, and that's enabled on a common platform using virtualization. This is for an instant messaging service, RCR, in fact. Another example, especially with IMS, where virtualization provides a very meaningful benefit is, IMS is otherwise let's say a large and complex network with many discrete functions. Virtualization allows you to implement those in virtual machines in a very small footprint and form factor, right? Maybe traditionally, if you're implementing each discrete function on a dedicated server or blade or chassis, you might have racks of equipment in order to provide or deploy an end-to-end IMS solution. With virtualization, we're in fact doing proof of concepts and demos with operators where we're deploying an entire IMS Volte network on 2 blades of a industry standard server, blade server architecture. So obviously that's not necessarily the commercial solution, but it allows operators to deploy end-to-end solutions with a very small upfront entry cost by dramatically minimizing the hardware footprint required to enter. So I think that's just maybe a couple of examples as to the benefits of virtualization. I wanted to maybe go back and double back on the Webrtc topic as well. Yeah. I think operators will also embrace Webrtc. I think there's a view, I think a predominant view that operators have is that, the landscape has changed. I think they're no longer just competing with each other. I think there's the reality of OTT service providers and the need to provide, if not necessarily compete with, but the need to provide comparable services and user experiences as consumers have with OTT. And to that end, one of the experiences that we all have when we're familiar with Apple devices and the Apple ecosystem, for example, is the ability to use all of their services across different device types. The FaceTime service, for example, works seamlessly whether you're on a tablet or an iPad or an iPhone, absolutely seamlessly. I think when operators look at their services and their launches for video, voice, etc., they want to have the same seamless user experience across multiple devices. I think Webrtc, one very obvious use case for Webrtc that operators understand is the ability to leverage this technology to extend their services to different device types, to PC, to tablets, etc. And it's an important part of the equation to get to the same level as OTT in terms of the user experience. I think Webrtc beyond that just has, I don't think operators really have their heads around what the benefits or the potential can be. Certainly it's a very there's a discontinuity, the technology is very innovative, and I think they haven't really yet scratched the surface on what they can do with it. As Ray mentioned, there's numerous verticals they can begin to play in with Webrtc, but I see it as a fundamental part of the equation, just even for the initial services launches that we all understand very clearly, just for voice, video, etc., in order to have a very coherent multi-device user experience and service delivery strategy.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned numerous verticals. Do you think that in many of these industries the demand is there and it's expected, or do carriers need to go in and educate about what Webrtc even can deliver?
Well, I think the demand is there. I think it's already proven. I think operators are already using it. I mean, if you just think around call center technologies and/or that are very proven, using basically legacy technologies. You have call centers that have 20 dial-in lines or 50 dial-in lines and PBXs that support all of that. All of that with Webrtc can be replaced. I think if operators embrace Webrtc, I think it maybe changes the price points with which they offer the services, but I think they can improve what they offer the service. Call centers are an important part of the operators' business models and revenue generation, and I think Webrtc can improve what they're offering, and is one use case that where there's immediate and obvious benefits. And then when you get into things like healthcare, financials, retail. I think the ability to provide contextual communications. People call in, they say, I need help with something, it's a chat session. You can immediately, upgrade the session to voice. You can use video, see what I see, to say, here's the problem I have, and share that. I think they can really innovate and improve what they're offering in these verticals. And so I think people get it. I think they just need to make the initial investments in terms of how to instantiate that and deliver that. But I think they're going to go there very quickly.
All right, great. Thank you. Well, we are running low on time, so I'd like to go to each of you for a few closing comments. Phil, do you want to go first?
Sure. I think, certainly I would agree with this this view that for me, service agility is becoming one of the key aspects of sort of the virtualization debate that we have with operators, and that need to respond to the OTT threat, to the threat from other operators in their markets is certainly not going away. And for us, IMS seems to be one of those key sort of candidate sort of solutions to virtualize, and as part of this move to that richer service experience that many operators are trying to drive into their businesses.
All right, thank you very much. Phil Kendall from Strategy Analytics. Ray Adensamer is Director of Marketing at Radisys. Ray, can you share any closing comments before we run out of time?
Yeah, just I appreciated this session. I think media processing has always had an important, and if not a growing importance in the future networks. We touched a lot on Volte, Webrtc. As these different types of access technologies and client endpoints come onto the network, they all use different codecs. There's transcoding and transrating and interworking required in the media plane in the network, and that's what we're all about. Ian mentioned the example going into a trial customer and doing a whole IMS system on 2 blades. Well, one of those virtual machines could be a tiny little virtualized MRF from Radisys, but we also then offer the ability to help those customers scale up once they start to ramp up to like thousands and tens of thousands of ports. That's those are the types of problems that we're thinking about all the time and focused on solving.
Okay, great. Well, do keep us posted there. Okay, and Ian Maclean from Mavenir Systems. Thanks for being here. Do you have any closing comments?
Yeah, I think it's very clear the industry, our industry, has galvanized on the concept of NFV as a framework for which these next generations networks will be built. IMS-based and EPC networks will be built. A key strategy which Maveneer has, and we talk to our customers about, is that they don't have to wait for the NFV ecosystem to fully mature and then leverage the benefits of virtualization at that point in time, which may be 1 year from now, 2 years from now, etc. We're providing a fully virtualized EPC IMS-based product portfolio and enabling our customers to leverage those benefits for deployment flexibility, with the examples I gave earlier, for service agility, which Phil just mentioned is strategically increasingly very valuable to the mobile operator, especially when they're competing with OTT and they need to move fast, they need to be able to experiment with different services. They can leverage virtualization today and extract those benefits from the technology. They don't have to wait for NFV. It's reassuring and that the industry is very focused on NFV and that it will happen, but there are steps operators can take today to get those benefits and not have to wait in the future to get them.
Well, we will definitely want to revisit these topics in 6 or 8 months. There's a lot happening here. Thank you all very much for being here today. This is RCR Insights, and I'm Martha DeGrasse. Thank you very much.